Now, Joey, I'm not sure if you caught our podcast last week, but we chatted with Tracy Atiga, the CEO of Kanaloa, and you've effectively been our resident expert, counter ruck expert on the Pacific expansion teams into Super Rugby. So, what did you make of that, of what she had to say in that interview? And you've got any thoughts on what she had to say, basically?
Yeah, well, it was quite a insightful interview. I thought there were things there that I didn't know before that Tracy had mentioned, which is it adds to the fire, the frenzy, if you like. There were things that she mentioned just about Kanaloa and the waiting game that they now play, whilst the Fiji Drua team and Moana Pacifica are in the middle of how they're in the middle of getting funding together. I believe it's 10 million. She said.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 million in the space of 6 or 7 weeks or something like that. So there's not much time to get a team together, get funding together, and get it all together. So for me that was quite interesting, that part, as well as the fact that they've been able to hold off on any legal proceedings that they may have had in mind leading towards the end of last year. For against NZR. So I think I would like to commend them on that decision, because emotions would have been very high when that decision was made to give was it conditional licenses to Fiji to Moana Pacifica and Fiji Drua. So yeah, I think emotions would have been very high, and when you don't have experience or confidence in your own value or your own proposition, then you're going to make silly decisions in the moment, in the heat of all that emotion. So well done to them for holding off on that and deciding, you know what, we're going to wait and see how it pans out, see if Moana Pacifica and Drua actually do, what they said they're going to do, or what they believe they're going to do. And I also found it interesting that they were happy to point their investors towards Fiji Drua to help their campaign. I thought it was a very smart move, because of the two parties that were given the conditional licenses, Fiji Drua are the standalone, 100% standalone. So similar to Kanaloa, they get to make their own decisions, and it's a fully self-sufficient team in all aspects. So and what that means is there's no Rugby Australia or Rugby New Zealand getting involved in decision making, or 20%, 80% business, where they get to trial or test or drop or experiment with players that they want to, and when they want to, and not expect any resistance when they do that. So as they now have the ability to do with Moana Pacifica. So I thought it was quite an interesting and insightful interview indeed.
Yeah, that's my first time actually meeting Tracy and talking to her. She's onto it, eh? She seems pretty sharp. So, I felt just after talking to her, if Kanaloa was to win the bid, I think that they could be quite successful. But I was a bit concerned because the fact that they've already got the financial backing, they can get the team and the coaches together ready, they've got a good team in place. They put in a bid when Moana Pacifica didn't even put in a bid, and despite all those positives, they still got overlooked. Says to me, unfortunately, I think the writing might be on the wall for Kanaloa, which is really unfortunate. I think that, she talked about the control that New Zealand Rugby wants to have over this Pacific team, and I think that's going to be what ultimately stops Kanaloa getting involved. I don't think that New Zealand Rugby will allow a Pacific team, to come in that New Zealand Rugby doesn't have some element of control over. Carry on. Were you going to say something, Joy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, it's quite a funny one because New Zealand Rugby they realise that they've got an entity in Kanaloa that will not be puppeteered. They will not have their strings pulled by NZR by no means, and they're willing to do it all alone, find their own funding alone, and do all that at the expense of any kind of benefits of having access to NZR's expertise, experience, and business network. Kanaloa obviously, have some bright minds there that are confident enough that they'll get the job done. And by all accounts, it sounds like they do have the means and the ability to put something together, a product together that can and would benefit Samoa and Tonga unions, which is one of the main questions that have come out of all this malarkey, if you like. And if you ask yourself, where does the MP share of gains go to? And by gains, I mean, if you think deep into this scenario, you think, right now, NZR have, 5 teams, which only generates X amount if you're talking about broadcasting, right? Now, by adding a 6th team via Moana Pacifica, they now have more leverage. NZR now have more leverage when negotiating the TV rights with, say, Sky TV. It's pretty simple. Whereas, Kanaloa wants, from what I've seen, Kanaloa have wanted to decide their own broadcasting rights with the likes of Sky. That means they would have got their own slice separately. Then they would have given shares to Tonga and Samoa directly, right? So if you look into it that way, Samoa and Tonga lose out on any broadcasting gains that are now diluted because of the involvement of New Zealand Rugby. So this team, for me, as an outsider looking in, who's not by any means affiliated or in association with any of the 3 parties, it just looks like this team is for NZR gain, the Moana Pacifica team. And that's what my concern has been all along, is that, okay, is this simply a ploy for NZR to gain from? And, you'll have fans of rugby who will say, well, NZR should have some gains from this. Why wouldn't they have gains from this? Yeah, absolutely. They probably should. They probably feel like they should. They probably feel like they are the A side in every interaction they have. And rightly so. They've been taught no other way. So, but sometimes I question, some of the rhetoric that comes back from various corners of the Pacific who, just question these entities or these organizations or these conglomerates or these groups. They're using our Pacific brand as a selling point to the broadcaster. They're talking to the broadcaster on our behalf. Now, if you don't see what's wrong with that, then you're missing a lot. Whereas you look at a Draw or Kanaloa, they're talking direct to Sky. Maybe not so much Draw, but Kanaloa for sure. They're talking direct to the likes of Sky and creating their own revenue share of the broadcasting, you see. And that's where you've got to have faith in, people who've been there and done that. So I guess if you've been in a room full of decision makers like boards of directors, and you know what it's like to put proposals forward, both physically on paper and in the verbal form, then you'll have some experience in how to deal with these matters. So I just think, the 80-20% thing, 80%, 20% thing, whenever I hear about it, I think of puppets and puppeteers.
Yep.
And it's sad.
It is. That's my first time doing a sort of an interview style podcast. I know they're trying to get Tracy to come on the back of the 135, which is one of our other podcasts on our network, and they're very good at doing the interview style. But you're right, those points you raised, which I should have probably followed up on Tracy with. I wanted to know if she was prepared to make some concessions if it does come around, because I don't know if the way the current bill that they've got, I don't know that New Zealand Rugby Union will sign off on that, just for the reasons you said. They'll get none of that broadcast money if Kanaloa negotiate it themselves. They can operate on their own. They could potentially take 100% of the players that they want. New Zealand Rugby, it's a scary thought for New Zealand Rugby to allow that to happen without control. So I wonder if it came to it, if she would be prepared to do with the 80-20 just to get it over the line, to say, because I don't know New Zealand Rugby, and I don't think New Zealand Rugby are going to go with Kanaloa's proposal, even though it's very good. They're well organised. They've got the finances. If you didn't have sort of a biasness, you would think this seems like the easy answer. They're ready to go, but they've gone for sort of the answer that's a lot more convoluted because it suits. They can have their hand in it a bit more, So yeah, I think that she might come up on one of our other podcasts, and I know the back of the 135 guys are really good at pressing that stuff. So good thoughts there, Joey, for sure. And we'll keep following that kind of law story, Wana Pacifica story, all of these Pacific bids quite closely. So looks like there still seems to be the story that never ends in a lot of ways for us as well. Seem to keep coming back to it.
Yeah, it's just relatable to other areas of society, especially, from the eyes of a Pacifica in New Zealand, It's not just rugby where this happens. This happens all over the show. It's just been highlighted more by this Kanaloa saga, if you like, NZR saga.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's unfortunate as well because I think... Well, we'll see what happens. I thought Kanaloa, the bid that they proposed would be more helpful towards Pacific Rugby, but obviously New Zealand Rugby are pulling the strings and they're interested in what's good for New Zealand Rugby. So, yeah, we'll definitely keep following that up.